All right, so it's a little bit after 2, so we're gonna get started. So hello everyone, welcome to our second career prep seminar of the semester. This week we have Stacie Gibbins here to talk to us about her career path and what she does as an economic geologist working in the oil and gas industry. So Stacie, feel free to take it away.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for asking me to come and share my experiences transitioning from academic work at University of Arizona into the oil and gas industry. I see some familiar faces from Amalia worked and interned with us. I do recruiting as well, and we can talk more about that later on. There she is. Okay, so you're more than welcome to ask me any questions along the way if you would like. This is for you all to, hey Pete, hey Barbara, understand my path and potentially your path to getting into the industry if that's of interest. And if not into the industry, that's fine too. Maybe some of what I say you'll be able to utilize moving to wherever you do go in your career. So just a quick agenda. I'm going to show you what my connection with the University of Arizona Department of Geosciences is, what my education trajectory was, my career with ExxonMobil, give you kind of a sampling of what I've done throughout my career, and then I think probably what might be most useful for you all are the closing thoughts and thinking about what skills you might want to be acquiring as you're going through your education process, what level of education you may need to get into the industry, and then some potential next steps for trying to get into the industry, whilst recognizing that it's not the greatest time right now, unfortunately. So what is my connection to University of Arizona? I got my master's and my PhD with the department. I was there a long time, and I worked both of my degrees with Dr. Spence Titley. And I was in the economic geology program. And so the title of my PhD is there. I looked at the magmatic and hydrothermal evolution of the Ertsberg intrusion, which is a mining district in West Papua, Indonesia. And so Dr. Mark Barton, Dr. Eric Seedorf, and Dr. Mihai Ducea were on my committee as well. And then Dr. Patchett was as well, and I think he's no longer in the department. So I got my PhD, and during that time actually had an internship with a couple oil companies, and we'll get to that, but was offered a job with ExxonMobil with the contingency that I had to finish my PhD. So as soon as I finished my PhD, I went straight into industry. And so I've been away at industry working, and then probably within the last 3 to 4 years have been actively on a recruiting team for ExxonMobil that comes to the University of Arizona. We did not last year to recruit. And if there is a lot of interest around that process, we can talk about that here or later on. I'm also a member of the advisory board. Barbara asked me to become a member when I started recruiting. And then I have also been a contributor to the Computational Sciences Center in Gold Simpson. These didn't all come up. Okay. So I did my PhD and master's work in Papua New Guinea. And this is the kind of bird's head of New Guinea. Can you see my pointer or not?
We can see it.
Yeah, okay. So it's up in the highlands here in New Guinea. So this was a helicopter ride. You can see the open pit here. This was back in 2002. Now I'm sure it's significantly deeper. And it was a copper gold mine. it was a really cool story because you can see this little lake right here. This was a skarn deposit, which is mineralized carbonates that was discovered back right before World War II by some Netherlands geologists. They climbed up this huge escarpment, got into this valley, and there was a big knoll there that had all this copper gold mineralization. So he wrote up a big report. It got tabled, and then a geologist at Freeport-McMoRan, which I think does some work with you all, found the report in the 1960s. And so the geologists, they were working salt mines and oil at the time, ended up doing a reconnaissance to this area. And even though it's remote and there was absolutely no infrastructure here at the time, they deemed that little knoll of mineralization economic to go produce. So while they were producing this, they did exploration and hit a really big gold mine here. It's one of the richest copper gold porphyry mines in the world, or was at the time that I was studying it. This is the Grassberg mine. So I took 3 trips there during my master's and PhD work. It was really neat geologically, and unfortunately I only have a picture of kind of the upper part of his head, but there's Spence Titley. We went 3 times along with Kurt Freehoff and logged a ton of core, which led to my looking at the magmatic and hydrothermal evolution of this whole system. And so part of my promise to you all was the connection between economic geology and the oil industry. And so the questions that we were asking, when I was going through my graduate work is, what is the source of metals? Where are they? How did they move through the system? And how were they trapped? And so those 3 questions I think about every day in the oil industry. What is the source of my organic matter? How is it distributed? Where did it migrate through the system, and where did it trap? And so that is kind of, regardless of these are all hard rocks. In the oil industry, we think about sedimentary rocks. I'm still thinking about geologic processes and similar questions. So after that, well, that's not after that. So those are the things that I did. And I try to work out the differences between mineralization related to an intrusion that is off this picture and mineralization related to this for my PhD. But in terms of my education trajectory, it started way back in the 90s. And I actually started in a community college, and I was actually business route. I was marketing communications. So I was doing a bunch of economics and accounting. And then in 94, I think, I went to Oregon State. So, and at Oregon State, I had to take an elective that was geoscience. And then I was like, how do I take more? And so I was trying to tell my dad, look, I really need to understand geology, because what if I start this business and it's like on a geologic hazard or something? And he was like, whatever, Stacie. So anyway, I changed my major pretty much when I was ready to graduate and did geology. And so while I was at Oregon State, I tried to do a lot in terms of getting other research opportunities. So the first thing I did was I got a research experience for undergrads that was hosted through Bates College in Maine. And while I was there, we went to Maine, and it was a group of like 20 students from around the nation. And then we went to Mexico, and we were working on a lead contamination in water issue. And every different person in that group took a different part of the problem. And my part of the problem was looking at the lead zinc sulfide mineralogy in a mine there and seeing if we could find any arsenic minerals that could, it was an arsenic contamination, sorry, not lead. So I came back to Oregon State, and John Dillis was there, and John has a very strong relationship with Dr. Mark Barton, which is kind of how I got to University of Arizona. So I worked with John Dillis and did a small undergraduate thesis. And then I also got in like little jobs working at a radiation center and a neutron activation center. And I got a gig on a boat, research vessel boat, oceanography boat. So I just tried to make sure I could get experiences and do some little research on the side. I took about 1.5 years off in between undergraduate and graduate. I worked at a national forest on the Oregon coast, that's the Usla National Forest, and actually couldn't believe I was getting paid to do this job because we got to go out in forests and forest roads all over the coast range and map out geomorphological hazards. Essentially, where's the road slipping into a stream that might have salmon? So that was pretty cool. And then the summer before I came to University of Arizona, I got an intern. I don't know what this stands for actually, but it was the thing you get from field camp where the USGS offers you a kind of internship. And so I got to work at Yellowstone National Park with a geologist out of Denver, Lisa. Oh my God. Now that I need to know it, I forgot. Sorry. She was looking at the source of the youngest tuff that blanketed Yellowstone. I'll get back to on her name. So then in fall '98, I started at University of Arizona with Spence Titley and Mark Barton, and was there a long time, as you can see, doing a master's and a PhD. But also during my time at University of Arizona, and which is a huge benefit for you all, is there's lots of opportunities to do internships with industry, either the mining industry or the oil industry. And so at the time, we would have about 8 majors come through, and that's major oil companies come through and interview you for internships. And I'm like, I don't even know those kind of rocks. I study hard rocks, and the department, probably the HANA equivalent, actually was like, you need to go interview. So I did, and I got an internship. COP is ConocoPhillips. I actually got the internship with Phillips, and while I was there, they merged with Conoco. So that was a little awkward, but didn't really affect me much. And then the next year I got an internship with ExxonMobil, and that was actually 2003. And they waited for me to finish, and I started May 2006 with ExxonMobil. So what's my career? Started with ExxonMobil on March 1st, 2006 as an exploration geologist, and 15 years later, I'm still an exploration geologist with ExxonMobil. And so I think one thing that is really different about ExxonMobil compared to a number of other companies is they want you to be there for a career. And so they invest in giving you good training and good opportunities to move around. So I have a lot of experience with opportunities that ExxonMobil gives, but I'm really naive to like a lot of the cyclical nature of the oil and gas industry. Because we haven't done layoffs as consistently as other companies with the cyclicity of the commodities. Having said that, we went through our first set of layoffs in December last year that the company had done since '86. So they really don't want to do that. They invest a lot in us. But so I have a lot of experience of getting variety within my one career at ExxonMobil. A lot of other geologists in the industry probably have experience of moving maybe multiple jobs, or also even interacting externally differently than I might. And we can have a conversation about that if you guys have any questions there. Please feel free to interrupt. You're not interrupting. This is for you. So I'm an exploration geologist, and I actually I have an expertise in hydrocarbon systems. And so in the industry, exploration is really the first thing that you do. And so we kind of have two things that we do as exploration geologists. We either take a region and really try to do a focus study, understand the form, fill, and the charge of the basin, and where the sweet spot is that we think the company should try to get acreage to evaluate further. So at this stage, we have very little data. Sometimes, we usually have, so we have like gravity magnetics, so we can understand how deep our basement is. Sometimes we have seismic data, sometimes we don't. If we have seismic data, it's usually quite widely spaced, and it would be 2D. So you'll have these little ribbons of 2D data across the basin that you're trying to extrapolate what's going on between your data. We do have well data sometimes, and I'll specifically talk about a basin I'm working in to show you how big the uncertainty is right now. And so our job is to go in, like I just finished a study where we evaluated the entire basins in Africa and high graded which basins we want to look in. And then within there, we'll go. So first step was, we like these kind of basins, we don't like these kind of basins. Then we'll go into a basin and say, what part of this basin do we like best? And I'll talk about that a little later, how we evaluate that. Then we will try to convince management that they should buy acreage, and then we'll evaluate to where we might want to drill a well and test our geology. So we're at the high end. We got limited data, lots of ideas, lots of uncertainty. And so we need to understand, what is our uncertainty and how does that impact how we might say, well, we have this big of an area, but it actually could be this big, or it could be this big. Like letting management know how risky our uncertainty is. And so we'll present a sweet spot area, and then we have to consider all the above ground issues. So we're geologists, we're recommending the technical story, but we also have to understand, and my company probably within the last 5 to 7 years have asked us to start increasing our business acumen, understanding the commercial aspects of what is valuable, because it could be geologically, technically a good idea, but then the fiscals of the country you're working in, the risk, if there's militia, et cetera, environmental considerations, you just can't go forward with it. So you put that overlay on top of your sweet spot and see if it's something management wants to get into to get acreage. The other thing we do, so these are usually longer focused, maybe like 8 months to 3 year studies. The other thing that we do are these quick evaluations. So especially exploration in deep water or offshore, to drill a well or even to gather some of the seismic data, et cetera, it's very expensive. And so you can go to a data room, which, let's say I got this acreage, I own it 100%, I want to test it, but I don't want to pay for all that. I don't want to take all that risk on. So a data room is where a company will say, hey, I've got this stuff, come see if you like it, and become our partner. And so usually that kind of evaluation is like, you'll go travel to a data room, look at their data for 1 to 3 days, come back, put it into what you know of the data, and make a quick recommendation to management within a couple weeks. And then the other one is turned around. Each country will have different little blocks at certain times that they're like, these are up. Do you all want them? And they will put packets of information together for you and give you a certain amount of time. And you evaluate the data and make a recommendation to participate or not. And these two tend to be a much shorter time frame than a more regionally focused one. Does all of that make sense? Yeah. Okay. So at the exploration stage I mentioned, we're always considering form, fill, and charge. And so form is like, how did this basin form? Is it an extension? Is it a basin that was formed during extension? Is it a basin that's formed because of thrusting? When did it form? And then you're thinking about how it's filled and when it filled. Where do I think my source rock is in this basin? And a source rock is your organically enriched rock that's going to ultimately, hopefully, get buried deep enough to produce hydrocarbons. Where are my sands that might trap it? Where are my structures that might lead to the strap? When does my seal come over? And so we are constantly thinking in what we call play element space, and making maps of distributions through time, overlaying them and saying, this looks like the best part in the basin. And so this little schematic here is showing you, this is the edge of where I think sands are. So this is a play element reservoir presence right here. This is the limit of where my trap domains and seal is. And then this is the kitchen. And so you're essentially looking at a union of where those things overlap. And then this green polygon down here is your sweet spot. So we're really thinking at very, very big elements. And the next slide will kind of show you, as you move from exploration to development and production, your uncertainty decreases because you're increasing your amount of data, and the scale is very different. So the exploration stage, which I have all my experience in, is very, very big scale. Yeah, we think there's sand there. We don't quite know how it was deposited right now. We just think it's right here. We haven't broken out any channel systems or anything. So we have sparse data. It's also important to consider, okay, we have a most likely geologic scenario for how this formed. Are there any other possibilities? Because we have such sparse data. And if there are, what are the implications? And so perhaps an example of that might be, we think that this mound that we're seeing in the subsurface is carbonate. Well, a carbonate buildup can have porosity and can potentially get hydrocarbons into it. What if that mound is not a carbonate? What if it's a volcano? If it's a volcano, then you have no porosity or you don't have a reservoir to hold your trap. And so we have a most likely case that it's carbonate, but possibly could be volcanics. And we have had a number of carbonate mounds turn out to be volcanoes. So it's just making sure, I have a most likely scenario. There is a risk that it could be this. If it's this, this is what that means. and making sure all of those risks are communicated clearly. And then, so you can have different scenarios. You can also have uncertainty. Well, I think my reservoir extends over this area, but it could just be here. Like I have this huge range in the spatial distribution of a certain play element. What does that do for we're always thinking about the best outcome we could have. What does that do to our high side? So we want to know it's most likely here, but if it could be this big, let us know. There's a low chance that it could be, but give us all the uncertainty space so management can say, okay, there's a lot of unknown here, but it could be really big. And so we're always thinking in terms of uncertainty and risk in exploration. And so this just kind of shows you the geologic scale and resolution that you may be considering at the different stages of the industry. So in exploration, you're like, okay, I got a basement. I might have some salt. I think I had a carbonate reef at some stage and some sands with some traps. And I have very little data. Like this might have a well and a couple of 2D lines through it. Very sparse data, and you're thinking big picture, what could this be? So I just recently was involved in an evaluation where we looked at this area that the industry just hadn't looked at in probably 15 years on West Africa. So it has one well that isn't even in the basin, but showed us that there was organically enriched rock. And it had, at the time, 2D seismic data that was spaced about every 10 kilometers. And so we put together schematics like this and said, there's a couple plays here. And we think it's over this acreage. And the company went in, negotiated with the government, and got actually 7 blocks over 2 countries with very little data. So now, so this is the scale I'm used to working at. And now we have what's called exploration operations. We have acreage and we have a work program we have to. So when you get acreage from the government, you tell the government, I'm going to do these things. You tell the government and you pay them. I'm going to do these things to evaluate the hydrocarbon system in this acreage. And we have a phased approach. So the first phase, our work commitment was to get seismic data, 3D seismic data. And we have 3 years to evaluate. So we have 3 years to acquire it, process it, and evaluate it. The next 3 years, if we decide to go into them, we have to drill a well. So in 3 years, we have to evaluate everything and decide whether we want to drill a well, go into the next stage and drill a well. So right now, I'm actually kind of straddling these 2 scales. I'm continuing to work the regional perspective to give context to the operations team for what they're seeing in their little postage stamp of 3D. And so what they're doing is they're really looking at what are, I said, oh, there's sand here. They're going in and they're like, what does this sand look like? Okay, I think I have this channel system here. And trying to understand individual channel systems. These with the contours on them show a structural trap. So this sand went over the nose of something, or the nose popped up after the sand was deposited. A lot of this stuff that we're looking at right now is a strat trap. So it's just a pinch out onto a slope. And it's pretty tricky because the resolution of what that up dip pinch out is very difficult. But for the most part, they are going in, understanding the multiple different fairways and where they could have. And actually, there's one sand here, and then you see there's 2 different intervals here. So they're really dissecting that and trying to understand. If we drill a well and we come in with hydrocarbons, then they're going to want to develop it. Well, we'll go to development, and they're going to take this channel and really understand all the different episodes of channel development in here. And so the resolution just gets more and more, it just becomes a higher and higher resolution. They'll get pressure data. They'll drill a bunch of wells into this one sand and try to understand, where was my hydrocarbon? Are they connected? Is there baffles? How can we produce it? And then during production, so this is all 3D seismic, which is essentially a cube of the subsurface. When you get into the production scale, you'll do 4D. And so what that means is they have a 3D cube, and they understand what fluid looks like in that seismic cube before they started developing it. And then they take the exact same 3D survey at time X during production, and they will be able to see how the fluid's moving through time. The 4D is a time component. And so the resolution just gets much, much more, well, you get a higher resolution as you move through this whole thing. This whole thing is called the upstream. And so I have spent most of my career here. At ExxonMobil, you can move through all of this. And you typically are in an assignment 3 to 5 years. So I ended up specializing in hydrocarbon systems, and that's really important at this part of the life cycle. Once you know you have oil, you don't need a hydrocarbon systems person telling you that you have it, because you already know you have it. That's when a petroleum geochemist would come in and understand what kind of fluid you have there. But in my company, you move multiple, every 3 to 5 years, and you can move between the different parts of the upstream. And they actually, they mostly want people to be generalists, people who can easily move through all of these different scales and different data types. But I happen to be a specialist, which is less common. Does that make sense? Yeah. Sometimes when you're used to talking about this stuff all the time, you're not sure if you've explained it well enough. These are things that we use in recruiting. So, oh, I went the wrong way. Okay. So what have I done with Exxon? So this, in a nutshell, are the different areas that I've worked or lived while I've been with ExxonMobil. So primarily I've been here in Houston. And I was actually living in Jakarta for about 14 months back in 2011. They have assignments that are called expat assignments, where you go live in another in another country. And because you have an expertise, or they're trying to broaden you, or whatever. So I lived in Jakarta. That was pretty awesome, because I got to do a lot of evaluations in Southeast China. My boss was in Melbourne, so I had to take a trip to Melbourne. I would love that gig. It's gonna be hard. I actually grew up over here in Dunedin, New Zealand. So the whole time I lived in New Zealand, I never went to Australia. So the first time I went to Australia was working for Exxon. But each of these polygons are basins or areas that I have worked in exploration with the company. And so you can see I've worked the Gulf of Mexico. This is Guyana, and actually Guyana right now is our money ticket. We So one of the things we're really trying to do right now is get a lot of acreage with lots of uncertainty for very cheap and evaluate it. And Guyana is the success story of that. And so we had a huge acreage position that actually went into force majeure for like a decade. And force majeure is Venezuela and Guyana were having a border dispute. And so we were just like, can't work. Like Venezuelan army ships are coming out. We're not going to work till it's safe. So we got to extend our evaluation clock. Anyway, right now we have discovered over 8 billion barrels of oil in multiple different reservoirs here, and we still have a huge area position and a huge number of prospects that we're currently drilling right now. This is offshore Brazil. So I got to go to Rio and then did a huge evaluation from the Santos Basin all the way up to Bahia Sul. It's a big, there was, when Africa and Brazil rifted apart, initially they rifted and formed big lakes. And the organic matter in the lakes is algal and it's super rich. It makes gorgeous oil, really, really, really high quality oil. And then right before this whole system opened up to marine conditions, salt was deposited, very thick salt. And so the salt makes a super seal for this petroleum system below it. And so I did an evaluation, did some basin modeling here for them. And now I work the conjugate margin. So you're always thinking about, how did this basin form? What can the conjugate margin inform me for what was happening to my margin? So I work down here. Well, I work all of Africa right now, but I'm specifically working Namibia, southern Angola, and Namibia. I worked Niger Delta, and I've done a little bit in Madagascar. I worked, this is the Caspian Sea. My internship was up in the Caspian doing basin modeling. And then a lot of this work over here in Southeast Asia was, are the black? Yeah, so these are all these data room hits, like company in Vietnam's like, hey, come look at our data. So you'd go take a 2 or 3 day business trip, evaluate something, come back, make a recommendation to the company. And so I started here, I've gone all over, come back here, like you're just moving all the time. Which for me, I kind of like, it's a little bit bittersweet in a way. So when you first come into a place, you don't know it that well. So you have a steep learning curve, but you don't feel like you can contribute as much because you're still trying to understand what all we've ever done. Now, this most recent stint in this group, I've been there since late 2017. So now I'm like one of the oldies in the group. Well, like legitimately one of the oldies, and then one of the people that have the longest time. And so then you're really, well, wait, we evaluated that 3 years ago. This is what we were thinking there. What may have changed what we were thinking, etc. And this is just what I've worked. ExxonMobil and the industry in general are global. Some companies are very specific to a region or a type of hydrocarbon system they're evaluating. And then the majors, which would be like us, Chevron, Marathon. Well, Marathon's not a major, but they're a big one. Shell, BP, Total, they're pretty global, E&I. Okay, so what do I do? Okay, I just showed you I've worked exploration all over the world in multiple basins. But I thought you might be interested in understanding how we work. So I'm a hydrocarbon systems specialist, and I'm on a team of about maybe 9 people right now. And someone really understands geophysics well. Some people are really good seismic interpreters. Some people kind of can do everything. Some people think about how do we value stuff once we find it. And so there's never a day, and rarely even an hour, that I'm not collaborating with people, because we're always communicating and trying to understand how do we bring this together. So I'm usually not doing something in a silo. And then we also have a really strong research company, which I've had a stint in as well at ExxonMobil. And so we'll talk about this a little later, but you don't have to have a PhD to work in the research lab, but actually that's who you did your internship with, didn't you, Emily?
Yes, I
Yeah.
did.
But now I think hiring, you would, if you had a PhD, you'd be some specialist that probably went through, okay, I got like 5 minutes before I can hand it in. So right now I'm working a basin model and trying to understand, okay, I have this rifting that occurred that generated oceanic crust at the base of my basin and a bunch of volcanoes up there. And I consider heat flow coming from the mantle. And so I'm working with the research company to say, okay, how does hydrothermal circulation of volcanoes into a water affect my heat flow of my basin? And so I'm getting a global tectonics person and geodynamicists to help me think about that question. The research company does all kinds of things. They do legitimate research, or I'm like, I don't have enough time to work this problem. Can we pay you funny money and you do it for us and just tell me the results? So you don't have to be able to do everything, but you do have to understand how to take what other people have done and interpret it for how you need to sell your story. ExxonMobil has a great training program. As I mentioned at the start, we really invest heavily in training. And so we did a lot of it internally. So 2 to 3 week courses, protected, meaning your work group needs to say, you get to go do that training for 2 or 3 weeks, trained by experts in the company. And what they were really good for is training, but also networking. So learning who are the experts and other people in the company that I might need to pull on and use as a resource later on. Most of the industry actually would likely use vendors to do their training. So there's webinars. There's a strong vendor called Nautilus that runs field trips. You could do field trips when you go to conferences, etc. We probably are going to start doing more of that. But the point of saying training is you do not have to be fully trained at the end of your degree. You are consistently going to be taking training of some kind or another, most likely throughout your career. I mentioned you change assignments every 3 to 5 years and move between the stages. I just haven't, but most people would. And then other opportunities in the company. So first of all, I've been there for 15 years, and I have remained technical. But there are opportunities to go into management or have technical leadership roles. There are also, so you can kind of take 2 paths, a managerial path or a technical path at ExxonMobil. Other companies, I'm sorry, I don't know. And then other things you can do, like there's formal teaching. So I have participated in building coursework in teaching to ExxonMobil employees. There's formal and informal mentoring. So when newer people come in to your work group and they need your expertise, you can be their mentor. Actually, even if they don't need your expertise, you can be responsible for mentoring them. I'm really active in recruiting, except last year. And I actually really like our recruiting program. I think it's pretty cool. So if you guys are interested in that, we can talk about it. And then there are other stretch assignments. One of the most common things you'll hear from people retiring from Exxon is, the assignments I got that I thought were the lamest turned out to be like the best growth, right? Like that you want to do geoscience, but they're actually going to have you go over here and do something with government affairs or something. You know, you never predicted you would be over here, and then you were. And then you get to meet other people, see a different part of the company, and have a different perspective when you do come back to technical. And so part of what I like about being at Exxon is that there are just a wide variety of opportunities outside of just doing geology if you want. I don't know how that works in other companies. I think a number of the bigger companies, you probably have those abilities. I think maybe in smaller companies, it would be like, you're going to do geology and it's going to be in this basin, maybe for your whole career. Okay, so closing thoughts, what I thought you guys should know. So what do you need? What schools? So the biggest thing we look for are strong fundamental geologic skills. You don't have to be a stratigrapher. You don't have to be like an expert in structure. You just need to have really good fundamentals in geology. And if you're going to University of Arizona, you will have that. Like, the program there is amazing. The other thing you need is strong integration, or to be considering multiple types of data, because we don't just use one type of data. I mentioned we have well data, we have global Venda data, seismic data, studies, what we thought before, et cetera. So you got to be able to, we put paleoclimate into our models, et cetera. So it's just being able to gather a lot of data and understanding what data is important and how you would use it. I mentioned we never work in a silo. You need to be able to work with people. So collaborating skills are really important. And then just critical thinking. So really nothing super, you don't have to be a specialist in anything. One thing that is different than when I started is that there's starting to be a desire for people coming in to have quantitative skills and coding skills. I do not. But we also have training. So you can do a MATLAB class tutorial at work, or understanding Python, know how to write code or R, etc. So I'd say if you're trying outside of geology to have specific skills, I would make sure that you're doing some kind of coding skills. Requirements. When I was interviewing, we're only taking masters and PhDs. Now we're mainly focusing on undergraduates and masters, and so PhDs, you would likely have to be very specialized for that. So for undergraduates, the really important key for you all is developing your critical thinking skills. And I think we really strongly encourage you to have research experience and see a project through to be able to be thinking about a geologic problem, setting up a hypothesis, testing it, etc. And so that goes over here to this. Participate in undergraduate research if you can. And I know there's lots of opportunities at University of Arizona. And then to get out there, go to geoscience conferences and present. Talk with recruiters. Usually there's recruiters at them. A lot of times industry is running short courses. And so one of a recruiting short course that we do is through GSA. It's a field trip. So talk and get in front of recruiters. And then when oil and gas are recruiting on campus, come see us, chat with us. And I don't know how other companies do it, but we're really interested in a long-term relationship and seeing you through it. So like, I'm going to use Amalia for an example. We talked to her for a couple years, and then we're like, it's time, like, come intern with us. So it's not one hit. If you don't get offered an internship, that's it. Like, just keep developing. We want to see you grow through your academic career. What do I wish I had done differently? Kind of didn't want to write this down. I think the thing that I thought when I was going through academics, that my graduate research was going to be the end of my learning. And that is not being farther from the truth for me. And so I thought I had to know it all now and come and be like all knowing, which my skills weren't. Like, my knowing was hard rock, so that didn't really help. Once you finish in academia, whatever career you go into, you're just going to be learning the whole time, especially in academia. But even with me, I'm learning all the time. And I did not have that perspective when I was like, I might have started in industry earlier if I had known I was going to learn so much and be constantly challenged. So if you have any questions or you want to get a hold of me, please do. I need to get better about LinkedIn. I'm kind of like, don't do a lot of social media. So I went on there yesterday and I saw someone from a previous recruiting hub had asked me a question a month ago. And I was like, oh, anyway, I'll try to get better at that, but follow up and say, hey, I asked you a question in LinkedIn on either of these emails. So I hope I didn't blab too much. Sorry. Do y'all have any questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
I'll jump in because I gotta head out a couple minutes before the hour. But well, first, like, thanks, Stacie, for doing this. This is really useful. I know it's hard to like talk at a Zoom room for
I've been doing it for over a year.
I know. It's still hard. I feel like it doesn't get any easier, even though we've gotten used to it by now. But yeah, well, yeah, thanks for doing this. This is really interesting to see your path. I kind of have a question about ultimately, why did you decide to kind of stick with the oil and gas industry versus, you had experiences before your graduate research with like national forests and Yosemite and that kind of thing. So I'm just wondering, what about oil and gas kind of piqued your interest more so than kind of working in sort of maybe a government agency that manages natural resources or that kind of thing?
Yeah, so for me, I really think it was my 2 internships and seeing the types of problems that you're working on and how varied they are, and then the people and the resources that I had in the industry to help tackle those problems and think about them. Like, I really, really liked that aspect. Like, the national forest was fun, but I didn't see more of the resource management, right? I was making a product. Whereas when I was in the industry, so if I'd had a different look, I may have been biased that way. In both of my internships, it was very clear what problem what I was working for, like why it mattered, which was a question I consistently asked during my PhD and my master, like, who cares about this? And I could, that answer was easier to answer in because of the experiences at in the oil industry. And I really liked the problems. They were really challenging. That help? Not really.
Yeah, no, that clears it up. Thanks.
Stacie,
Hello.
thank you for taking the time to do this. I really appreciate it. I was just curious, after your little background slides on Grassberg, if you ever ran into any of the UT group that worked out there, because I actually did some undergraduate research with Mark Kloos at UT Austin, and I know that he's sent quite a few students out there.
Yeah, so I actually overlapped with him on one trip, and so Mark Close's team mainly did the structural analysis in that area, and then Kyle, what's his name, Richard Kyle. He
Yeah.
was kind of the economic geologist, but not like Spence Tilley. He was more. So I ran into a few. We didn't overlap very much, but we did in conferences. And then randomly, the other day, I was on a Zoom chat with a guy at work who's like in IT or geoscience support, and he had a mining hat on or a hard hat on. I'm like, oh, yeah, so where was your background picture taken? And he goes, well, that was in a mine in New Guinea. And I went, what? And he had worked Ertsberg from
Cool.
UT, actually.
Oh,
And
cool.
so I was like, oh my gosh. So that like totally made my day.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
yes, we interacted. I think he had come out and done a lot. His group had done a lot of the work earlier than us. And then Spence Titley's team came out. So we overlapped a little bit, but a lot of the early like structural analysis that his group did was before we started coming in.
Yeah, I think Ben Suppy was there probably in the early 90s.
I met
Late.
Ben actually because he was working back there. One of my trips, I met Ben. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard a lot about these people over the years, and I got the chance to work on the stockwork zone in the main Grassberg intrusion. It was really cool.
Oh, you
Yeah.
could probably tell more about Grassberg than me now. So many years.
Yeah.
So did you go?
I didn't get the chance to, but I've always wanted to. He always promised me that he would take me, and now I'm halfway across the country in Arizona working in basin-related mineral deposits with Mark Barton.
Oh,
So I don't know if that opportunity will arise, but if it does, I'll certainly take it.
so funny because Mark's the one that pushed me to go work Grassberg.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Initially, I was working with him, and then he's like, "You should go do that with Spence."
Yeah, I probably would have done the same.
Me too.
I have a question, Stacie. Thank you so much for your time today talking to our department.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I have two questions. The first one is Exxon going to be recruiting interns this fall at U of A and other colleges?
So last year, we didn't because of COVID.
Right.
And also because we were fixing to unfortunately have a layoff.
Mm-hmm.
This year, they haven't announced yet.
Okay, so maybe something to keep an eye out for.
Definitely do.
Yeah.
And I don't think we've definitively said no yet. We usually don't learn until a little bit later, like maybe right before summer. And then I usually coordinate the trip. So, and that's with Hannah and Barbara. So as soon as I know, we'll let them know.
Great. And then my second question is, so my research is more on the end of paleoenvironmental reconstructions using geochemical methods. So I'm not necessarily a first choice, I think, for an exploration geologist, but I am very interested in petroleum geochemistry. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about if there are separate opportunities or separate job positions for petroleum geochemists.
Yeah, actually, we have a really big petroleum geochemistry group. Actually, Daniel Albers just came to our lab from the department, although I don't think he's doing petroleum geochemistry. We have a big geochemistry group. So petroleum geochemistry is actually really important along the entire life cycle, more development and production. And so our petroleum geochemistry group does a lot. Yes. There's a lot of opportunities, and we do fluid inclusion work, we do isotope work, we do biomarker work, and then just, regular GC, what kind of composition. Yeah.
That's
So-
great. That's definitely more kind of my wheelhouse, I would say. So how would I get involved or try and, you know, get a job doing something like that? Would I need an internship first, or how does that work?
Yeah, so typically what we like to do is see you through a recruiting opportunity first. So like I come out and I interview students, and then we do a 2-day short course and we see how you interact and questions and you do a problem. And actually it's like a reservoir modeling problem. And then we will pick candidates to come and either do an internship with us or do a field trip short course or an in-house short course. And they're usually a week long or 5 days long if it's a short course, or a 3-month internship like Amalia. So we'll look at you there. It is very rare now to interview and get a job. Usually you will, although now I'm saying that, Daniel did the internship and then he came out and interviewed. I'm lying all over the place. Yeah, no, he did. But usually we want you to have seen you to see us and us to see you.
Okay, so yeah, I would probably have to go down the route of more of a geology type of internship and maybe express my interest in geochemistry to be considered
Yeah, I mean,
for that.
you could intern in the geochemistry group.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think that would
I
be
mean-
a little bit more in line with my skill set
Yeah.
than geology.
Yeah. But we don't necessarily match you up with what might be your strength.
Mhm.
And not to be rude, just to say, we really believe that we can mentor you and you can work on a problem that we can help you get, if that makes sense. And if there isn't a position in geochemistry and we still want to watch you, interact with you and see how it goes, we'll put you somewhere else. And then my advice to people that are interviewing and internshipping is like, you're evaluating the company as much as the company is evaluating you. So you got to see if the culture works, if the problem works, if the support group works, etc. And so when you're there, even if you might be working an exploration problem, you can say, I really want to go talk to someone in the lab, like get your mentor or whoever to get you in with them. So sample, see what's out there, and really make sure you understand how it all operates.
That's very informative. Thanks so much, Stacie. I'll keep my eyes open for any recruiting and internship opportunities.
Oh, I so hope we come out this year.
Me too.
Very frustrating last year.
Yeah.
We're at time. Were there any questions I didn't answer?
All right. Well, if no one has any questions left, thank you all for coming. Thank you, Stacie, for that awesome talk. And we'll see you all next time at our next career prep seminar.